It was just past midnight when I found myself in that dimly lit stair tower. You know the kind. Concrete steps worn smooth from years of use, metal railings cold to the touch, and that peculiar echo that makes even the smallest sound reverberate through the empty space. I hadn't planned to be there, not really. It was Marcus who had convinced me to explore the abandoned east wing of Westfield Hall. No one ever goes there, he'd said with that mischievous glint in his eyes. It'll be an adventure. And somehow, despite my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. The abandoned building had once been a prestigious hotel in the 1920s, later converted into university offices before being scheduled for renovation. Now it stood in limbo, not quite abandoned, but certainly not occupied, with most of the floors sealed off except for the occasional maintenance worker. The perfect place for two college sophomores looking for a thrill on a Thursday night when we should have been studying for midterms. I remember checking my phone as I waited, the blue light illuminating my face in the darkness. 12:17 a.m. Marcus was late, as usual. I leaned against the wall, feeling the rough texture of peeling paint beneath my fingertips. The air smelled musty, like old books and forgotten secrets. My heart was already beating faster than normal. A combination of the 4 flights of stairs I'd climbed and the unmistakable thrill of being somewhere I shouldn't be. I've always been the cautious one, the planner, the one who weighs risks and benefits before making a decision. Marcus, on the other hand, lived for the moment. He collected experiences like some people collect stamps, eagerly and without hesitation. It's what I admired most about him, this fearlessness that seemed so foreign to my nature. We'd been friends since freshman orientation, drawn together perhaps by our differences rather than our similarities. The sound of a door opening somewhere below startled me. I held my breath, listening intently. Footsteps on the stairs, confident and unhurried. I knew it was Marcus before I saw him. I'd recognize his purposeful stride anywhere. Still, in that moment of anticipation, I felt a strange flutter in my stomach that I couldn't quite explain. When he finally appeared, rounding the corner of the stairwell, I was struck again by how effortlessly he commanded attention. Marcus had that kind of presence, tall with broad shoulders, dark curly hair that fell just right even when disheveled, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He was wearing his usual outfit, faded jeans, a vintage band t-shirt under an open flannel, and those well-worn combat boots he refused to replace despite the hole in the left sole. "You came," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the enclosed space. There was surprise in his tone, as if he hadn't quite believed I would follow through. I said I would. I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Though I'm still not sure why we're meeting in an abandoned stairwell at midnight. Marcus grinned, that slow smile that transformed his face and always made my pulse quicken just a little. Because, my friend, the best stories never start with "I was sitting at home studying like a responsible adult." I couldn't help but laugh. It was so typically Marcus, finding the adventure in the ordinary, turning a simple exploration into something that felt momentous. He moved closer, leaning against the wall beside me, our shoulders almost touching. I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and subtle that I'd come to associate exclusively with him. "So what's the plan?" I asked, suddenly aware of how alone we were in this forgotten corner of campus. "Are we just going to hang out in a stairwell all night?" Marcus turned to face me, and something in his expression shifted. The playfulness was still there, but underneath it was something more intense, more focused. "I wanted to show you something," he said, his voice lower now. "But we need to be careful. Security does rounds every hour." That's when he first told me to be quiet, not harshly, but with a gentle urgency that made my skin tingle. "Shoo," he whispered, his finger briefly touching my lips in a gesture that felt surprisingly intimate. "Listen." I held my breath, straining to hear whatever had caught his attention. In the distance, I could make out the faint sound of footsteps, a security guard, presumably, making their rounds. Marcus moved closer, his body now definitely invading my personal space, but in a way that didn't feel threatening. Instead, it felt protective, as if he was creating a bubble around us both. "They'll pass by soon," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "We just need to stay still for a minute." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. There was something happening between us in that moment, something unspoken but palpable. We'd been friends for nearly 2 years, sharing late-night study sessions, weekend adventures, and countless meals at the campus dining hall. But this felt different. The air between us seemed charged with possibility. As we stood there, barely breathing, waiting for the security guard to pass, I became hyper-aware of every detail. The way Marcus's chest rose and fell with each breath. The small scar above his right eyebrow from a childhood accident he'd once told me about. The way his eyes never left my face, as if he was memorizing my features. The footsteps grew louder, then began to fade as the guard continued past our floor without stopping. Still, Marcus didn't move away. If anything, he seemed to lean in closer. "I think they're gone," I whispered, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Probably," Marcus agreed, but he made no move to step back. Instead, his hand found mine in the semi-darkness, fingers intertwining with a familiarity that belied the newness of this touch. But let's wait just a little longer to be sure. My heart was racing now, and I was certain he could hear it. This wasn't how I'd imagined the evening unfolding. I'd expected our usual adventure, exploring empty classrooms, maybe finding our way to the roof for a view of the campus at night. I hadn't expected this tension, this electricity between us. "Marcus," I started, not even sure what I wanted to say. Was I going to ask him what was happening? Tell him I'd been thinking about him differently lately? Suggest we return to safer, more familiar territory? I never got the chance to finish that thought. "Quiet," he said again, but this time it wasn't about the security guard. His eyes held mine, asking a question I wasn't sure I knew how to answer. And then he moved closer still, until there was barely space between us. Time seemed to slow down in that moment. I could feel the rough wall against my back, the cool air of the stairwell, the warmth radiating from Marcus's body so close to mine. I had a choice to make, and somehow, in that suspended moment, all my usual caution and overthinking fell away. I leaned in. Our lips met hesitantly at first, a question, an exploration. But then something shifted, and the kiss deepened with an urgency that surprised us both. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer, while mine reached up to tangle in his hair. It was as if we'd crossed some invisible threshold and couldn't find our way back, nor did we want to. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be, tender yet passionate, familiar yet thrillingly new. I could taste the mint of his gum, feel the slight roughness of stubble against my skin. The world outside our little stairwell ceased to exist. There was only this moment, this connection that had been building perhaps longer than either of us had realized. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, I saw a vulnerability in Marcus's eyes I'd never noticed before. Behind his usual confidence was uncertainty, the same questions racing through my mind. What did this mean for us? Where did we go from here? "I've been wanting to do that for a long time," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. His hand reached up to gently brush a strand of hair from my face, the gesture so tender it made my heart ache. "Why didn't you?" I asked, genuinely curious. Marcus had never struck me as someone who hesitated to go after what he wanted. He laughed softly, the sound intimate in our shared space. "Because you matter too much. I was afraid of messing this up. Us, our friendship. It's the most important thing in my life." His honesty disarmed me completely. This was a side of Marcus I'd glimpsed only rarely, the person beneath the adventurous exterior, the one with fears and vulnerabilities just like everyone else. "I've been thinking about it too," I confessed. "About us. About what it would be like if we were more than friends. But I was scared too. You're so important to me, Marcus. I couldn't bear to lose you." He smiled then, that genuine smile that reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. "You're not going to lose me. No matter what happens, that's one thing I can promise." We stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, talking in hushed voices about feelings we'd both been harboring. How he'd realized his feelings had changed last semester during our all-night study session for Professor Harrington's impossible literature final. How I'd found myself looking for him in every crowd, my days somehow incomplete until I'd seen his face. It was strange how being honest about our feelings made them seem both bigger and more manageable at the same time. The fear didn't disappear. We both acknowledged the risk we were taking, but it no longer seemed like a reason to hold back. We might have stayed in that stairwell all night, lost in conversation and occasional kisses that grew more confident each time, if not for the sudden blare of an alarm from somewhere in the building. "What's that?" I asked, instantly alert, the spell of our private world broken. Marcus tensed, listening. Fire alarm. Probably just a drill, but security will be checking every floor now. The urgency of our situation suddenly became clear. We were in an off-limits part of the building, after hours, where we definitely shouldn't be. If caught, we'd be facing disciplinary action at minimum. We need to go, Marcus said, taking my hand firmly in his. I know a way out through the service corridor on the second floor. Just like that, we were running down the stairs, our footsteps echoing loudly despite our attempts to move quietly. The alarm continued its persistent wail, covering some of our noise, but also adding to the sense of urgency. Marcus led the way, never letting go of my hand, navigating the dark stairwell with a confidence that suggested he'd explored this building more thoroughly than he'd ever admitted to me. When we reached the second floor, he pushed open a heavy door marked "Maintenance Only" and pulled me through into a narrow corridor lined with pipes and electrical panels. It was darker here, and I stumbled slightly, grateful for his steady grip. Almost there, he assured me, his voice close to my ear. There's an exit at the end that leads to the East Quad. Security never watches that door because the camera's been broken for months. I wanted to ask how he knew that, but this wasn't the time. We continued down the corridor, moving as quickly as we dared in the limited light. I could hear voices now, security personnel responding to the alarm, their flashlights occasionally visible through the small windows in the doors we passed. Finally, we reached a metal door with a faded exit sign above it. Marcus pushed it open carefully, checking outside before motioning me through. The cool night air hit my face, a welcome relief after the stuffiness of the maintenance corridor. We emerged onto a small concrete landing with steps leading down to the quad, currently deserted due to the late hour. We didn't stop until we'd crossed the quad and reached the safety of the large oak tree near the Humanities building. Only then did we pause, both of us breathing hard from our escape and the lingering adrenaline of everything that had happened in that stairwell. Marcus leaned against the tree trunk, pulling me gently toward him. In the moonlight, his face looked different, younger somehow, more open. Well, he said with a laugh that sounded slightly shaky, that wasn't exactly how I planned for tonight to go. I raised an eyebrow, my own breathing still uneven. You had a plan? That's not very spontaneous of you. He grinned, his arms loosely circling my waist. I'm full of surprises. Though I have to admit, getting caught in a fire drill wasn't part of the original itinerary. We both laughed then, the tension of our escape giving way to a giddy relief. But beneath the laughter was something else, the awareness that everything had changed between us tonight. We couldn't go back to being just friends, not after what we'd shared in that stairwell. So what happens now? I asked, voicing the question that hung between us. Marcus looked at me thoughtfully, all traces of his usual bravado gone. Now we figure it out together. Day by day. No pressure, no expectations. Just us seeing where this goes. It wasn't a detailed plan or a definitive answer, but somehow it was exactly what I needed to hear. This new territory between us was uncharted, and we'd navigate it the same way we'd become friends, with honesty, patience, and a willingness to take risks for something worthwhile. I'd like that, I said simply. He smiled, then leaned down to kiss me again, softly this time, a promise rather than a revelation. When he pulled back, he kept his forehead resting against mine for a moment longer. You know, he said quietly, of all the adventures we've had, I think this might be my favorite. I couldn't help but agree. As we walked back to our dorms, hands intertwined and talking softly about everything and nothing, I thought about how sometimes the greatest adventures aren't about where you go, but who you're with and what you discover about each other along the way. That night in the stair tower changed us both. What started as another of Marcus's impulsive explorations became the beginning of something neither of us had been looking for, but somehow both needed. In the weeks and months that followed, we'd have our challenges, moments of doubt, misunderstandings, the occasional disagreement about his risk-taking or my caution. But we'd also have countless beautiful moments, late-night conversations that lasted until dawn, quiet afternoons studying together in comfortable silence, adventures both planned and spontaneous that took us far beyond that stairwell. Looking back now, I can see how that moment, when he told me quiet and moved closer, was a turning point in both our lives. It was the moment we both chose to be brave enough to risk a friendship for the possibility of something more. And though neither of us could have predicted where that choice would lead us, I've never once regretted leaning in. Sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin in the most unexpected places, like a dimly lit stair tower at midnight, with someone telling you to be quiet as they move closer, their eyes asking a question only your heart knows how to answer. Total _char_count, 17,423.